Hello, and welcome to the Castle Talk podcast, where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds from Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the Alex Van Helsing series from HarperCollins. Tonight, Kaaron Warren is an Australian author of horror, science fiction, and fantasy, short stories, and novels. She's the author of the short story collections Through Splintered Walls, The Grinding House, Dead Sea Fruit. Her short stories have won Australian Shadows Awards, Ditmar Awards, and the Ari Ellis Awards. You have a heck of a lot of short stories, and your new book, The Grief Hole, is from IFWG, and we're going to talk about it. Hello, Kaaron.
Hey, Jason. How you going?
Outstanding, and I'm so excited. And do you know what, Kaaron? This is the first time I've actually done one of these interviews where there's literally an 18-hour difference
Isn't that
between
just?
us.
It feels really bizarre. So it's half past 9 in the morning, Sunday morning, mind you. So I have got up on a Sunday for this. Thank you.
Yes. Well, you know, that's how we suffer for our art. It is 3:30 in the afternoon where I am, and this is what we had to do. We had to find a time that would be some kind of a daylight hour for both of us, which is hard. 18 hours is a very strange difference. You know, basically, we're just incapable of wrapping our heads around that kind of a difference.
Oh, no, it is. It's really, really hard. You're in yesterday and I'm in today, whereas you think I'm in tomorrow.
I can't even imagine, like, the big committee in the sky, you know, like Laurence Olivier and Clash of the Titans, whoever decides how these time demarcations work. The idea that you would go, you know what, this part of India, half an hour off, just for the heck of it.
Yeah, no, that's right. I know, it's bizarre. And it's exactly that. It's really quite arbitrary, isn't it? Like, it's not that this is what it is. It's just arbitrary. It's somebody makes these decisions, really.
We've got, there are betters of us, I'm sure, out there who make these decisions and, you know, wander around Lake Geneva together and just decide. Okay. All right. I want to ask you about The Grief Hole. I've been reading The Grief Hole, and I have to tell you, this is it is such a beautifully written book that's just like thick with sadness and you're such a positive person. It's so much fun to talk to you, and yet because you and I have talked before, but
Yeah.
this book is so just rich with the expressions of sadness. And could you tell a little bit about what the book is about?
Well, it is that really is at the very heart of it, I guess. The title came. I often get my titles and ideas when I'm listening to the radio, and I flip around different stations to get. We don't have NPR here, but we have lots of variations of. We have commercial stations where lots of people are outraged by things,
Sure.
and we have government-supported stations where they often have really interesting interviews, and sometimes, like for example, where I'm from at the moment on our local station, they're probably talking about gardening.
Yep.
You know, about what you should do about your lilac that's not doing all that well. And, you know, but even that can be a place where you can get ideas from. So I was listening to an interview of some kind, and the person talked about what it is when you lose someone who's very close to you, and what's left behind is this grief hole. And the word just resonated with me, and I think it's something that I really did feel almost as a physical thing. I had this vision of it almost being a physical thing. And so in the book, that's what the grief hole is represented in 3 different ways. It's the emotional sense that you get when you lose someone who's very close to you. And one of the characters actually can see a physical black hole in those who are in a really dark place, I guess, rather than in a happier place. And then it's also this physical building that teenagers go to and kind of lose themselves there to an extent. Yeah.
And this, you know, there's a lot of books about people who can see ghosts, but hers are it's different from how I've seen it before. She, you know, what kicks off this book is the fact that she has a series of kind of adventures where she can see ghosts around that warn about how somebody is going to be injured. Where did that come from?
Oh, yeah, that's hard to say where that came from. It was just, and in a way, it's kind of her. I was trying to place her in a place where she was quite a judgmental person, as well as being a very helpful and good person. She's also quite judgmental of the people around her as well. So she's helping these, and mostly it's about domestic violence again, because it's a lot in the news in Australia here, as I guess it is over there as well. Just how many women and families and men too, you know, are victims of these things. So she's trying to help people who are in a position where they can't find the housing. They've got to get away. But at the same time, in a way, what my sense was that she was kind of judging them at the same time. So I felt like the ghosts were these embodiments of what she was feeling about these people. So the person who's going to die of drowning will have drowned ghosts around them. That's what she sees. So it's like a warning in some ways, but she doesn't understand how to stop it at the same time. So it's not like she gets this vision and she knows what to do about it. She sees these ghosts, but mostly she doesn't know what to do about it. She feels helpless, and she feels like the ghosts aren't there for her. They're there for their own selves. Like they're very greedy ghosts. They want this person to come and join them and be like them, I suppose. It's part of what that's about as well.
It's a very unusual vision of ghosts. I mean, the whole idea that they're greedily wanting one more person to be beaten to death, or to starve to death, or to be hit by a car. You know, and she becomes kind of a hero in a different kind of book. The stuff that she does, where she sometimes manipulates people into like getting arrested instead of killing their spouse or whatever. That stuff could play very differently here. She's doing, I mean, one thing I wanted to say to you, you know, I think you're very consciously in this book following what you might call a formula for how books normally go, except for the feel of it, the mood of it is very, very different. So much so that you might not even see that structure that's there. Because she, you know, after she does this thing where she tries to manipulate and save somebody, she ends up getting greatly injured. And she moves into a wholly different setting. And it is exactly what you would expect from a shift from Act 1 to Act 2 in a typical book, except for it's so artfully done that you don't even notice these structural things happening.
No, that's great. That's fantastic to hear, Jason. I'm very happy about that. I'm really conscious of, in anything I'm writing, I try to make it almost organic, I suppose. So it's like you're watching or thinking the story rather than actually reading it. Because they're my favourite books, are the ones that I just feel like I'm at the end of it and I've read the whole thing, but I haven't even noticed myself reading it, I suppose. So that's what I'm trying to do in the fiction, try and make those shifts seamless and try and make the storytelling seamless. It's a bit like in film, where if you notice the lighting, they've done a bad job.
Right.
You know, if you get to the end and you just have this idea or this sense that there was amazing lighting happening, they've done a fantastic job. But if you're noticing it, and I have the same feeling about the writer's voice. I try to make my voice not be heard at all, I guess, in the storytelling. So that's good to hear that it seems to have worked to a certain extent anyway in that case.
Yeah, I mean, you've this scene, by the way, where she first encounters the grief hall itself, because plot-wise, she starts out one place, she gets injured, she goes to sort of regain her health by moving to a house near the beach. And while she's at the house near the beach, she begins a new investigation into the death of her cousin. It's as simple as that. But it plays out, you know, it feels very organic. And as she's investigating the death of her cousin, she discovers this place called the Grief Hole, which you mentioned earlier, which is this physical space. And I have to tell you, this is so creative. I mean, the physical space of the Grief Hole, which is a building, like a 2-story building that's sort of boarded up, but the kids find their ways to get into all kinds of trouble. It reminded me a lot of like James Herbert or Peter Straub. Do you know Herbert?
Yes.
They and Straub, I don't know if you've read a lot of him in Australia, but both of them do these you know, they'll deal in ghosts and these ideas that could be treated with a lot less gravity, but instead there's just a thickness of emotion about it.
Yeah, well, I love both those authors. Peter Straub, I've read from a very young age. I just absolutely adore his writing. I would consider him one of my influences to a certain extent, just because of exactly that, just the humanity that he has in these terrifying stories, and just the way he gives such character to evil, I guess, at the same time. Like any of his terrible characters are so very believable. You can almost touch them, which makes them so much worse because you think they exist. You know, I really do. No matter what amazing paths he goes down, you absolutely believe that what's happening is real. Yeah, he's an amazing writer, absolutely amazing.
It does feel.
That place came. I was in Montreal quite a few years ago for Worldcon, which was just amazing, amazing city. But one photo I took was this huge building where the whole site had sheared off it. And you've probably seen those things as well. I'm quite fascinated by what was when it comes to buildings and signs and that sort of thing. You know, when you see when things have changed, but there's still the shadow of what was still there.
Oh, yes.
So this building was exactly that. The whole side had sheared off. And all you could see was just, there was halfway up, there was a doorway. One doorway was the only thing that was really left of the old building. There was the marks where the walls had been and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I've actually got it on I think I've got the photo on my Twitter. There's my Twitter photo at the moment of this amazing side of a building. And I just wondered what, it just totally entranced me. I got a lot of the imagery actually came from Montreal. The initial start to the story came from Montreal. The lace maker was inspired by a character I saw there as well. So, but yeah, this building really resonated with me, and just seeing this hole in the wall there and just wondering what would happen if you went in there. And
if you went in there.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I've seen those before.
Like it was this old building thing.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Well, she goes into the building and she's crawling. There's one point where she finds a series of basically just busted walls, and she goes from room to room. The other thing that it reminded me a lot of, this connection might not make any sense to you, but Candyman, which I don't even remember who directed Candyman, but the music was by Philip Glass, and that's what I remember. There was a lot of that, where Virginia Madsen is like climbing wall to wall, going deeper and seeing these old murals and stuff like that. Can I switch? I wanted to mention something, ask you about something. The thing that I thought was very real also here is the way that Teresa navigates the world of her family, who is very present in her life. She's not estranged from her family at all. Her mom's present in her life, her sister's present, and yet all of them are capable of such incredible sort of casual cruelty to one another. And this sounds just very well observed. Like the fact that her sister, when she calls and says, "Hey, come spend time with me," it says, I don't remember the exact words, but it says something to the effect of, her sister was always concerned that she would be asked for more than she was willing to give. And that's great stuff. All the family stuff is that way. The mom saying the horrible things that her mom says, just casually.
Yes.
Say anything you want here. I just want to hear about your thoughts about filling out characters with human behavior like that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I did want to really think about why Therese was the way she was. And I guess part of all of that is too that she's not the best family member herself. Like, she does a lot of blaming. You've probably known people like that too. They say they've got the worst family in the world, and you hear all the stories and they're bad stories, but then sometimes you think, well, I wonder what your interaction is with it all. So I guess that was partly about not wanting Therese to be this perfect human being. A lot of that stuff was about deliberately making sure she wasn't this perfect angel of everything, I guess. And so thinking about someone who comes from it's a perfectly fine family. There's no abuse in there, and she's had a very lucky life in many, many ways. But and the way that we all do get hurt in small ways by these little things that people say to us, especially our loved ones. I was saying with some friends last night, I was talking about how the way you take these comments often depends on your level of self-esteem at the time. So if you're feeling really good within yourself and someone makes a little snarky comment at you, you don't care. Yeah. But if you're feeling really, really bad within yourself and hating yourself and someone makes a comment, it can be devastating.
Yeah.
And do you agree with that? A lot of the upset that we get is the way we're feeling about us. What sort of swear our centre is at the time.
Well, absolutely. I was just watching. I was watching Jane, a movie version of Jane Eyre, just like a few minutes ago, right? So this morning, my daughter and I were hanging out, and I was like, "You got to see Jane Eyre." So the hardest part was just picking one, right? But we're watching it, and there's the point where she first meets Rochester, and Rochester tries to insult her. But everything that he says to insult her, like, surely you're not a guest, and she goes, and you're very clever to guess that I'm not a guest in the house by what I look like or whatever. He'll say something insulting. She always just sort of flips it back to him. It's because Jane has dealt with way worse people than Rochester, and she doesn't find any of his insults to be particularly troubling.
And it's because, but if she was feeling like, oh, I don't belong here, if she was standing there feeling like she absolutely did not belong and, oh no, somebody's going to kick me out or whatever, then that would have been a devastating comment for her to hear. Exactly. Yeah, so I guess that's a little bit of what it's about. So it's examining Teresa's own self-esteem and what she thinks about herself, I guess, as well, and that's reflected in what the people say to her.
When her aunt says to her, you're a vampire. You want to help people and be a social worker because it allows you to kind of feed off of their pain and feel better about yourself. I think that's a very cutting thing that she does take very seriously, whether she
Yes,
agrees
that's
with it or
right.
not.
Yes, no, that's right. And she does well. And for some reason, Aunt Prudence is the one who she mostly trusts, I guess, in some ways, because she doesn't think Prudence really wants anything from her, or has some pity for Prudence as well. But yeah, that is the thing. And I suppose it's so truthful as well, and she really does understand that level of truth. Prudence was
Yeah.
she was so I always am inspired wherever I'm living. I'm inspired by the things I see and hear. And Prudence was inspired. I lived in Fiji for 3 years,
Yeah.
and Prudence is just kind of a mix of people who I saw there, I guess. So physically, like sometimes I physically there was a woman there who used to be there on the streets, and she was all painted red. And every time I know she was quite an amazing woman. So she was the image that sat with me as far as Prudence goes. But yeah, I think Therese, there's a certain trust or something with Therese, with Prudence, because of her really direct honesty that's about Therese rather than anything else, I guess. But,
Well, and the fact
yeah,
that
and the
this
mother,
family
like I love making it. I have fun kind of making evil mother characters, and that one was, she's sort of this self-obsessed woman. But then I made the dad. The dad's a nice guy.
Yeah.
He's a bit sad with his jams and things, but I did want him to be. I don't know. I'm really not exactly sure why I wanted to have the mother be the way she was, but that just really happened, I guess. And then I thought, well, let's go for it. It's kind of fun writing those characters at the same time.
I love how her
I
mother
think the sisters have a really good relationship at the same time. Like the two sisters, I feel like, do have a strong relationship, which is shown by the end. Even though they're very different, and one sister's got this, family life with a good husband and the kids, and the other one doesn't have any of that. I think there is really something deep running through there, some deep connection. But it's, I've got a sister, and I think that we live on opposite sides of the world, but we do definitely have this very deep, or not spiritual connection, but very deep connection, regardless of how our lives are and where we are. So.
I love how the mother is horrid to her and also very jealous for her in a sense. She's very sort of protective of her. It's just very real. Okay. Another very real thing that's in here. You have this point where she leaves her job. She goes on leave so that she can go and recuperate on the beach. God, what a great setting. But before
I know. Don't you want to be there? Just gorgeous.
I know. In this beautiful little town with its beautiful houses. This is the kind of setting that I really love, where I feel like whatever you're trying to accomplish in the book, it can still be greatly improved by having your character move to the beach or a ski resort.
Exactly.
Either one of those.
Oh, I know. We do have places like that here in Australia, where there's little country places that are on the beach and very quiet, and not many people live there, and so this kind of ideal little place exists.
Yeah.
Of course, you need a car to get to it, but it's I know, very, very beautiful sort of setting. I really enjoyed it. And the little quirky cafe that's there,
yes,
that's a very Australian country town thing too, having the little quirky cafe. And I think it's something that pops up a lot in my writing, I've realised too, the little cafe. I guess because it's a centre of, a centre of community often in a small place, isn't it?
It's something that is required of literature, I think, of it's just a trope that's required. If you look at anything, anything that takes place in a village, there's usually some central pub or restaurant or cafe or whatever it is where everybody from town is likely to wander by. And it's one of those pieces of reality that's also artificial in a way that makes you feel good. You see it over and over again. If you watch Dark Shadows, they have the Blue Whale, which is that pub where the rich and the poor both go hang out at the pub for reasons unexplained. And
yeah, right. Well, I think that really is human nature, though. Like we really do gather, don't we? Yeah. Regardless of where we are, we gather at some stage. Not you want to have a lot of alone time as well, possibly, but you will gather. There is that real instinct to be with other people, I guess.
Absolutely. Oh, but what I was going to say was, you have this wonderful comment when she leaves her job, where they have a party for her and they leave stupid comments on her going away card, stupid jokes and whatever. And she says that she knows at the moment she's gone that she will disappear. That people working with you are like family, except for that what's different about it is that when they leave, it's as though they are family members who just poof out of existence, and
Well, yeah, I guess that's sort of, I've left jobs in my time too, and it does change. And people have left jobs, that it's, one of my little confessions I'll make to you is that I really love watching Survivor.
oh yeah,
The reality TV show. I just love it. Love it. And I think partly it's just watching the way things change. When there's this bunch of people, 15 or 16, whatever, start there, and everyone is all important, and then someone leaves and they're gone, and everyone just sort of, it's like water when a stone's pulled out of the river or something. The water just moves around, and then the next stone gets pulled out, and then the water shifts around again. And so there's this kind of memory of it there. But I think workplaces are like that to a certain extent, I guess. Like it's your life. It's you're there for 8 hours a day or whatever. And then you go and somebody else takes your place, and that all just goes on. Like you'll probably still catch up with work friends sometimes or whatever, but it shifts. And as soon as you leave that situation, and school, I guess, is the same thing. As soon as you shift that situation, everything does change. So yeah, that's where that was coming from.
And you even feel like an intruder if you come back. And if you're not officially coming back, if like for a reunion or something like that, if you're so foolish as to wander into your high school, after graduating, you're a crazy person. I mean, because you're not supposed to show up, and everybody's so this is just one of those weird things we follow around. I just loved that awareness. There was another thing that I really loved, which was they're talking about Teresa's mother and how she won't put up with noise. And like Teresa says, well, I don't think there's that much noise. And the uncle goes, I think she hears more noise than the rest of us. Like, as though she's so unfortunate as to have extra sensitive ears.
Yes. Well, then of course we find out later on that she does, like some of the things that are haunting the mother are stuff that Trees doesn't. We don't even really go there in the book.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, just actually, you were asking about the family relationships before, and the mother protecting, saying wanting to pull Teresa out of the stamp business, etc. And I think partly that there's a whole understory, there's a whole backstory of what happened in her mother's life.
Yes.
That I'm not telling in this book. Maybe I'll tell it in another book. But there's a whole lot of stuff that happened to her mother. Yeah. Which we don't know about.
Yeah, because her mom warns her, just, okay, well, if you start to see ghosts or whatever, just, I don't remember what she says. She just gives her advice on concentrating on anything else in order to, Yeah,
so what I'm really saying there, without really going to the mother's story, is that this mother is haunted all the time. She does hear noise all the time. She's got voices all the time, and she's seeing, so in some ways Teresa is the lucky one out of it, because these ghosts sort of stick with other people mostly, but for Teresa's mother, they're all there all the time.
Yeah.
So there's this whole backstory of her mother that I didn't tell in this story. But I guess partly it's about not judging people always by what they do, just trying to think about who they really are as people and what experiences they've had that have caused them to say the things they do or act the way they do. Trying to be a little more, So as far as, it's a horror story, but there's a lot of heart to it, I guess. There's a lot about humanity in there, and me in a little way trying to talk about what sort of world we can be if we just think a little bit about how people's pasts make them behave the way they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let me switch over to process. I'm just curious, like when you're writing, and you tell me how many short stories you've written.
Oh, I've written lots. I've written like close to 300, I think.
Good Christ.
And I've actually sold, having like some of these I didn't get paid for, and some of them failed or whatever. But I think I've made about 200 sales. Like I've sold a lot as well. Yeah. So I've been writing stories since I was. Sorry.
Like 250 you've placed, I think, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, but some of them are in tiny little magazines and things like that. Like I count everything, every sale, every online sale, and everything. So they're not major. Some of those aren't major sales, but it is over 200 pieces of fiction that I have placed somewhere at some stage. Yeah.
I mean, if you let's say that you were a playwright and you wrote a play, and it's being done by a summer stock theater down the street for like a couple of weekends. That's still the play. It's still a public performance. It's still an
Yes.
audience.
Oh,
It's
exactly.
this is real. And if you died and 200 years went by, that would be part of your bibliography.
Yeah,
That
no, that's
is.
right. Exactly, exactly. And I don't regret any of them. I don't. I've loved every single place I've appeared, from weird little photocopied magazines to Penguin Books anthology. That's all of it. I love all of it. But I am a fairly
Yes.
obsessive writer, I guess. I'm always thinking about it. It's a really major part of who I am as a person, I guess. If I
Do you
think about,
think
oh,
it's
look, I've got to.
true? I mean, that's a hell of a lot of writing, and I mean, it's a hell of a lot of writing time. Do you think it's true, this notion that you feel like the stuff you're doing now, you've learned things instinctively that used to baffle you when you started working on stories?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question, and I'm not sure. Like, I think in some ways it's easy, but in some ways it's still really hard. It can still take me 3 months to write a short story. Like, I'm not a fast writer. I do a
Mm.
lot of thinking about things, and I want to get it right, and that sort of thing. Yeah, lots of reading, and lots of thinking, and lots of research, and lots of drafts. Usually, it's very rare that I'll come out with the first draft, even though I've written so much. I still
Hmm.
I still do find it quite hard. It's not an easy process. I really love the process, but for me, it's still hard. It's not. It's
Yeah.
not. I don't just sit down and write. It takes a long time usually. But I'm
I,
writing. I think I'm writing differently now. I'm probably. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think improved in some ways, but then I actually really do like my early stories as well. It probably sounds terrible, but I read back on my early stuff, and I think that was actually I'm not ashamed of any of it. It was what it was at the time, and I think it still stands up to a certain extent.
oh no,
But I did a
and
lot
I
of reading.
wouldn't
Like,
even suggest that. Yeah, yeah.
I didn't actually start publishing till I was writing really from the age of 5 or 6. I got my first short story was at age 7, and having spoken about my sister before, that one she was younger than me, nearly 4 years younger, and that one was about a girl who had a little sister who wouldn't stop crying, and then one day the little girl went away and never came back. So
Ah,
I wrote that story like 7 or 8, which is a
so it was a
pretty dark
fantasy.
story. Little fantasy, little just wish she'd stop crying. I do adore her very much. But yeah. So I was
Oh,
always
that's funny.
always taken by the dark side and by crime. I always loved crime stories and that sort of thing. So I have been writing from that age, and around about 14 I started to write what I would consider proper short stories.
Hmm.
And I wrote a novel at that age too, but that's never seen print. It's just it was just a teenage thing. Look, I still think it's actually pretty good for that age, but then I
How
didn't
long
actually
was
start.
this teenage novel?
Sorry.
The one you did when you were a teenager. How long was this novel?
I was about 50,000 words, I think.
Good Christ, that's
I know
amazing.
it's a proper novel. I mean, it's basically an Australian rewrite of The Outsiders. S.E.
Oh,
Hinton,
sure. Yeah,
which
why not?
I just absolutely adored. And I couldn't believe that she was so young when she wrote it, and so without me really realizing that's what I was doing, which I think a lot of people do when they're first starting out writing, I just wrote a story that was pretty much that. But we had different groups, different. We had 2 different racial groups here, and I just had them fight against each other. So yes, but it
Wonderful.
was pretty good, for that age. And I did finish it, and I did actually send it out to publishers, and so I was pretty keen from a very young age to be a published writer at the same time. It wasn't just about creating. I really always wanted to be in print and have the books out there.
That's amazing. I one thing I was thinking about was S.E. Hinton. If you look at like The Outsiders and stuff like that, I don't think that book's even 50,000 words long. I mean, I wouldn't. It's because it's quite trim. It's a light
Yes,
book,
yes. Yeah,
and
yeah. No, it probably isn't. It might be 30, 40, maybe. I don't know.
well, and
I
that's
still
how
love
it
it.
used to be. If you look at Shane, I think I've got Shane on my shelf here. It's the same way. It's probably a
Yes.
40,000 word book, and
Yeah.
then somewhere along the way, books all had to be like 60 or 90,000 words long. And I think now we're beginning to swing back in the other direction where, with thanks to ebooks and stuff like that, people care less about how long the book is, and
Yeah,
I
yeah. And novellas, like we're certainly seeing novellas on the rise, aren't we? Which I'd love. I love novellas.
oh
I love
sure.
reading them, and they're fun to write as well. Like there's just it's a really cool length to work with.
It's a good time. I think it's a good time to be a writer because there's so much experimentation and format going on. Uh, so yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
exactly. And yeah, opportunities, and it's yeah.
So, if you were to write today, I don't know if you're going to do any writing on Sunday, but do you go out? Do you stay home? What do you do?
Oh, I switch it up a little bit. Depends on who's at home and how much space I want. I mostly do write at home, but I move around the house. We've got quite a big. We live in the suburbs in Australia, so we've got quite a big house. We move around. I've got a backyard, so I'll sit out there for a bit. I write by my first draft is always by hand, or almost always by hand, so it means I can sort of move around. Sometimes I'll go to the National Library.
By hand, like on a yellow pad, or like.
Yeah, well, we don't really have the yellow pad thing here. I can buy them, but we don't. Like, we have mostly white paper. Yeah, but that sort of thing, or exercise books, or what I call my favourite ones are what I call the Harriet the Spy composition books.
Yes,
Harriet the Spy. It's just those black and white ones. First time I went to America and I saw them at the shop, I went, I got so excited. And we can actually buy them here now. So every time I just love them. I have a ridiculous exercise book. Do you know what I mean by exercise book? They're the soft cover ones that you would take to school and have your different.
I mean, I know the ones that tend to look like a leopard skin, right?
Yeah.
And I think those are the ones you're talking about. We typically in college and everything you just use spiral notebooks.
Yeah, right. Well, that sort of thing too. So or anything like that. I have more of those in my house than any sane person should have. I'm always buying them. I just love them. A new notes will go in them, and research will go in them, story will go in them, and so I really feel, I don't know, and I've got to have the exact right pen, so I have a different obsession of pen each time.
Love it.
But I've been stuck on these pilot high tech points, they're called, and they're just beautiful. They make the words flow. So what that means is I can write anywhere. I'll often go and sit out if it's a nice sunny day but not too hot. I'll go get a bit of sun, or I'll move around. A National Library is a really gorgeous old library, and there's something very inspirational about writing there as well. So I move around. Yes, it's got lots of old books and amazing archives there as well, where you can go and see letters of. I was doing some research a few months ago, looking at the letters of a woman artist who was painting in the 40s or so, and had this I won't tell the story now, but this terrible tragic story, and just this and to be able to go through her letters, and it was just absolutely amazing. But the actual things that she had written, and there's little notes on the side and invitations that she's crossed out and said, I don't think so, and just to get that real, I know, it's just gorgeous. And a letter, and in there, I think, it was in another box of stuff I was looking at, was a letter to the father of our first Prime Minister, when he was still a young kid, and it's just his brother saying to the father, "You've got to be a better father, otherwise he's not going to end up anywhere." And this is the man who went, then he ended up as our Prime Minister. So
sure,
it's just so the National Library has got access to all that amazing stuff as well. That's all very inspirational.
What city is the National Library in again?
That's in Canberra.
In Canberra.
Right. Yes. Because most people think Sydney's our capital, but Canberra is actually the capital.
It's funny, experimenting with writing by hand, like writing an entire novel by hand. I have done that once. So the last novel that I completed, I did the whole thing first by hand, and then typed it all up afterwards.
Right.
Which was I have to say, that was basically like writing the same book twice. It was a very old-fashioned thing to do. I mean, because it was literally just starting from page one and just retyping it. Because really, the thing that I had written was really just like hearing somebody talking to me. It was, half the time I couldn't necessarily read what the conjunctions were, so it was really just a big sort of suggestion of an entire book. It's a weird exercise. Maybe your handwriting is better than
my handwriting is not too bad, but I certainly do if I'm really going crazy. Then sometimes I can't read what I've written, which is really frustrating. Can't even guess at it. Mostly I can though. I do, because I think that's part of it. Like I'm not very neat, but I do, like, part of it is the pen on, the physical pen on the paper and how it looks, I guess. So mostly it's a bit better. But how many words was that you wrote?
I don't remember. I think that was like a 60,000 word book. It wasn't very long. But that's part of the process is the retyping is kind of like a second draft. The first draft is the writing it out, and then as you're typing, something else happens in your brain, doesn't it?
I think.
Yeah,
Things are
yeah. You
organised
start
differently
to
as you're typing. Yeah.
well, and you compose a little bit differently. It's true, and the rhythm of the writing. A lot of times it will come in that second draft. You know, uh, you know, you've got a very distinct rhythm in this in the grief hall, which, as I said, is often is so conversational and so sort of matter of fact about what's going on through this girl's brain, and yet it's so full of heaviness, and it's almost
Mm.
impossible to explain how it's done, but it has a tone. It has a heavy tone that you can feel. You can feel the sadness, which is
Mm.
again why I said Peter Straub, because it really reminded me of Straub a lot.
Yeah, well,
All right.
that's fascinating.
Uh,
Thank you.
well, I'm happy to share. I really really enjoyed this. Okay, Kaaron Warren. The book is The Grief Hole. It's from IFWG publishers in Australia, but you can get it here, and you can also get it in an ebook, and people are leaving a lot of really wonderful reviews of it, as well they should. I just love the way that ghosts and some very familiar concepts are presented here. It's very mature, and it feels very real. I'm so glad that you took valuable time out of your Sunday morning to discuss
I
this with me.
know. I know. Sunday morning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Day's half gone now. I'm up now. Have to go off and do some writing or something.
All right. Well, enjoy your Sunday. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope people look for the grief hole, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Oh, thank you, Jason. It's been fantastic talking to you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.